Right. Hello everyone, and welcome to this session on curating conflict. My name's Hannah Crowdy and I'm the head of Curatorial at National Museums NI. Thank you to everyone who's joining us both here in Liverpool and those joining online. The session is being recorded, so something to tune into if you're interested after the event. I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes today and then would welcome any questions people may have. You can share those online via the app or those in the room. If you want to ask a question at the end, please do. So I'm here to talk today about our work on the Troubles and Beyond at National Museums NI, and particularly how we've approached this difficult subject through ethical curatorship. And just to give some background to those of you who may not be aware of our situation in Northern Ireland, the Troubles, as it is sometimes known, is a period of civil and political conflict starting around 1969 and extending to 1998 with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, which brought peace to Northern Ireland. But we are very conscious in our work that this idea of and beyond is really important because beneficial as the peace process was, and much as Northern Ireland has moved on, it's not that the conflict just ceased at that point, and we still live with many issues associated with it today. In our approach to Beyond, we also seek to look beyond events that are directly connected to conflict and look more broadly at people's lives during the time, bringing in lots of different experiences. It was a conflict in which 3,600 people tragically lost their lives, of whom over 2,000 were civilians. It involved political and sectarian violence that impacted directly on families and communities. And Northern Ireland is a small place with a small population, so the scars of this are still very much felt today. There's no consensus on the causes of the conflict, which is something I will talk about, and the particular ethical challenges that creates for us. And we see it as really important to keep facilitating dialogue and building greater mutual understanding, and we feel that museums have a key role to play in that. So obviously all of us apply ethics on a daily basis in our work, but this type of work comes with very particular ethical considerations. And the quote here is one that we share at the introduction to our Troubles and Beyond gallery at the Ulster Museum. We say the Troubles affected almost everyone who lived here and many others from further afield. Inevitably, the interpretation of this period of our history is contested in terms of significance, meaning, and responsibility. While we have a shared past, we do not have a shared memory. And that final sentence is particularly key when we think about the lack of consensus in Northern Ireland. And that lack of consensus isn't just about what happened there, it's also about how we acknowledge that today and how we move forward as a society from the conflict. Being such a recent conflict, there are still many victims and survivors of what happened. And the image you can see on this slide is of a lady called Flo O'Riordan, whose son Sean was tragically killed when he was just 13 back in 1972. The portrait is one of 18 which form an artwork called Silent Testimony by the artist Colin Davidson. And it is 18 portraits of people united by their experience of grief and loss during the Troubles. The exhibition has been transformational for us in how we deal ethically with this very difficult history because it has brought us into contact with an organisation called WAVE, who represents victims and survivors. And they have helped us train and support our staff, and by extension support visitors who come to our museums and have to come to terms with some of the shocking and upsetting things that have happened in Northern Ireland. There are legacy issues, and you only need to look at the media on a daily basis and there will be something that speaks to Northern Ireland and the conflict there. Even just yesterday, you may have seen there was a bus that was hijacked and set alight in Northern Ireland, and whilst that may not be directly linked to the conflict, there will be reasons associated with it why that has happened. We have very particular responsibilities in terms of what we would call good relations, and it's really important that in our work as museums we're not, even unwittingly, fostering further discord in our societies, and instead it's important that we're promoting mutual respect, tolerance and understanding. And just Within the last year, we at National Museums NI have formulated our own ethics policy, and within that we say that we will actively promote good relations between persons of different religious belief, political opinion and racial group. We will promote cultural pluralism and respect for diversity, build social cohesion and reconciliation, and celebrate and support all aspects of our cultural and linguistic heritage. And I thought it might be helpful to directly take the Code of Ethics as my inspiration for this talk and identify how exactly we use it in our work. So which aspects of the code are particularly relevant to us? I've selected here 4 principles related to public engagement and public benefit, and 1 to stewardship of collections. And I'm going to talk through each in turn to say what they have meant for us and how we have implemented them. So 1.3 in the Code of Ethics states that museums will support free speech and freedom of expression, respect the right of all to express different views within the museum unless illegal to do so or inconsistent with the purpose of the museum as an inclusive public space. So how do we do this with our work on the Troubles and beyond? We make sure we extend an open invitation to participate in our work, and we have done that through public announcements, talking to people about what we do, encouraging them to get involved. We have set up particular projects to engage with different people and encourage different views to be shared in our museums. And the image you can see here is from a project called Reimagine, Remake, Replay, which is funded as part of the National Lottery Heritage Fund's Kick the Dust programme, which is about getting young people more involved in museums. And it was part of a programme that they ran, sharing their own views and opinions on issues such as gender equality and LGBT plus rights. And we make a direct call within our gallery space as well to say, this work is ongoing, we still need your help, we want you to have your say, we want you to have a chance to be a part of this. Something we have to consider in freedom of speech is the difficulties that collections pose if they share views that could be seen as offensive. And that is the case with our collections. For example, we have material that shares sectarian viewpoints and material that shares homophobic viewpoints. And what we have to be conscious to do there is that we recognise the impact and consequences of these views. So where we can get permission to share them, we do, and we make sure that we always involve those who are the victims of these hateful viewpoints, and we ensure that their experiences and their response to these kind of views are represented in our collections and in our interpretation. And it's important that we provide a space for debate and discussion. And again, from our ethics policy, we recognise that our museums are safe and shared spaces for everyone. For this reason, we will support freedom of speech and provide forums for the respectful sharing of different views and perspectives. Exceptions will be the sharing of views that are sectarian, racist, sexist, ageist, ableist, or homophobic. Where our collections express such views and perspectives, we will ensure we curate them in a sensitive and informative manner, providing context and seeking the input of communities. And 1.4 from the Code of Ethics states that museums will ensure that information and research presented or generated by museums is accurate, take steps to minimise or balance bias in research undertaken by the museum. And again, coming back to the point about the lack of consensus around the Troubles in Northern Ireland and the very divergent viewpoints, we have to be clear in the museum that everything that we do is based on very sound research and that we are seeking to involve different viewpoints. So one of the ways that we've done this is to work with academic advisors. We had an academic advisory group who have worked with us on the Troubles and Beyond Gallery. They have advised us on interpretation within that space, and that includes the approach that we've taken, the context, the accuracy and the inclusiveness. They have suggested partnerships to us and helped us form new networks, and they have advised on the collections, how we might develop those further. Really importantly, they have acted as critical friends to us, and being critical is a really important part of what we do. We're clear that we're not either condemning or celebrating individuals or events that happened, but instead we seek to analyse, we seek to provide context, we look at motives, we look at actions, we look at impact, and we look at policies. We seek to learn from lived experiences, and the image you can see here is part of our Troubles and Beyond gallery where we share personal testimonies. Individuals are invited to share those testimonies. It's a completely open space. We change it regularly, and we share people's thoughts and experiences in their own words. We do not interfere with that in any way. And most people who choose to be part of that are happy to be identified, but there is an option to be anonymous if people prefer to do so. And part of that is about how we bring in multiple perspectives, and we would work in a way that we would talk about as narrative hospitality. We have that space where different narratives are welcome and are shared, and they're counterpoised, if you like, with the museum narrative, which is still involved by lots of different viewpoints, and it allows us to be inclusive, but whilst also basing it on accurate research and minimising bias. And important as well is the fact that we have this admission in our gallery space, and whenever we talk about this work, that it is ongoing, it's not resolved, and it continues to evolve, it continues to develop, and we continue to look for people to help us with it as we learn. 1.5 in the Code of Ethics states that we will acknowledge publicly that the museum benefits from all those who have contributed to the making, meaning, and presence in the museum of its collections. We think people do contribute to the collections. They also help contribute to our understanding, to our programmes that we offer, and ultimately these people are part of our history. The image you can see here is of Anne Devlin and Judith Jennings, who are two civil rights activists who were participants in our Voices of 68 project, looking at the events of 1968 in Northern Ireland. Contributions to that project were across the political and community spectrum, again, being very conscious of minimising bias. And the contributions that those people made included film testimonies, which have become part of the museum collections, physical donations to the collections, contributions to both permanent and temporary exhibitions, GCSE study days, and other public events. And the image there is just at the launch of one of our exhibitions, where we do acknowledge that support that people have given to us. And it's really important that we acknowledge that support, because we could not do this work without such contributions. They add depth and breadth and the immeasurable value of people's lived experiences. And then 1.6, museums will work in partnership with communities, audiences, potential audiences, and supporters of the museum. This is something we all do in museums, but just to give a sense of what it means to us in Northern Ireland, this is a quote from an organisation called CRAC NI, which stands for Cultivate Respect, Appreciate Inclusion in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is home to people of many cultures and communities, each of which brings its own richness to society as well as its own issues. An understanding of diversity and a developed cultural awareness promotes integration and inclusion, fights discrimination, and builds stronger, more peaceful communities. Really key to this is about being proactive. We tend to be a bit complacent, I think, in museums about feeling that our museums are welcoming to everyone, and that means everyone will come into them and everyone will feel involved and welcome there. But that just isn't the case. We have to go out, we have to make people feel welcome, we have to make them feel included, and we have to find ways for them to directly be part of what we do in the museum. And part of that is about relinquishing control and enabling people to become involved in co-production, co-curation. And the image you can see here is of when the Ulster Museum was awarded Queer of the Year back in 2018 by a local organisation, Queerspace, and that was recognising our efforts to collect and represent LGBT+ experiences within the museum. And that was from a place of there being very little material in our collections. When we spoke to representatives from LGBT+ organisations, they said we weren't sure the museum was a place for us. No one had ever come to talk to us. So that has meant a lot to us, that the work we've done has been acknowledged by our partners, and we continue to work with them. And then 2.1 is the collections point I've picked out, and it talks about preserving collections as a tangible link between the past, present and future. Balance the museum's role in safeguarding items for the benefit of future audiences with its obligation to optimise access for present audiences. So it's getting really at the kind of notion of conservation versus access and how do we manage that in a museum. But it really speaks to us at National Museums NI and our role within Curating the Troubles and Beyond, because we think it helps us speak to our role and purpose in society, and that there is this misunderstanding that museums are just about the past, but kind of why do we matter today, and what is our role in looking to the future as well. So the image you can see here is of an exhibition called Collecting the Past, Making the Future, marking Centenaries 2021. It was shown at the Ulster Museum earlier this year, and it was to mark the very difficult, contentious centenaries of partition and the creation of Northern Ireland. The first section was fairly traditional, looking at the events of 100 years ago and the key protagonists, helping people to understand what happened and how we got to where we are today. But the second section was looking at the impact and legacy of partition across themes of politics, culture, society, and economy. The key text in this section said, "Much has changed over recent decades, with equality now enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement. However, the continued existence of Northern Ireland, which for many is a source of pride, is divisive and irrelevant to many others. Somewhere between these seemingly irreconcilable opposites lie the daily lives of millions of people who have managed their joys, triumphs, sorrows and disasters of life over the course of a century. For many, then as now, politics did not define their identities. They got on with their lives with the humour, courage and empathy that is the best of all our characters. Perhaps, if anything, that is what we should celebrate together. And we feel strongly that our collections can help us to do that, to connect and explain events and experiences over time and space, to understand continuity, change and opportunity." Now, I'm just going to play a short excerpt of a film that is at the entrance to our Troubles and Beyond gallery at the Ulster Museum, because I hope it shows how we bring all these ethical considerations together in a clear and accessible way for our audiences.
This is more like history to me than politics. I live in history, not the sort that's just written in books.
Would it not be better to forget about history? All that happened? Maybe that way we could then live in the moment, rather than raking up the past.
But if we don't know where we've come from, then how will we know where we are now? How we can move on?
Would that be better, drawing a line under it? Get on with life?
It's not easy for some people. But maybe we could draw a line, if we knew what we're drawing it under.
My daughter thinks I should give them this. She heard they were looking for things. It's just a bus ticket. I was heading out one night to the Orpheus Dance Hall, York Street. Ballroom of Romance, as it was called, out before your time. I was sitting in the usual spot on the upper deck, looking forward to the night ahead, when the bus got caught in a gun battle. The windows on the other side of me were shattered. Miraculously, no one was injured. I've carried it with me ever since. Couldn't throw it away. A reminder of how life is so fragile.
It's the sort of thing that should be in a museum.
It's only an old bus ticket. Wouldn't mean anything to anyone else.
If that's all it was. But it's your story behind it that transforms it. It makes it personal and moving. My God, do you see the back of it? A confidential phone number you can call if you have any information about murders, explosions, or other serious crimes.
Why? That was the usual then.
Yeah, but don't you see? Usual, but totally unusual.
I'm David, by the way.
Quailin.
Pardon?
Quailin, like the small bird of quail, and then in. Quailin.
Quail.
That's it.
You're the first quailing I've ever met.
Do you want to go in? I can show you around. Sure, I'm the expert now.
So that film was actually developed on the suggestion of our academic advisory group, who thought it might be a helpful way to try and communicate what we were trying to achieve through our work. Hopefully it shows how the exhibition space is a space in which people can come together. It's a space to learn. It's a space for different viewpoints and experiences to be shared. It is very much built on the contributions of communities. It's a space where we seek to challenge perceptions, and that the collections are absolutely core to it. They are key to furthering understanding and empathy. So the MA's Code of Ethics is a really important guide for us in our work, but so too are ethics within a Northern Ireland specific context. So I thought it might be worth mentioning the Principles for Ethical Remembering, which were developed by the Community Relations Council and the National Lottery Heritage Fund for the Decade of Centenaries period, which is looking at events on the island of Ireland between 1912 and 1922. You will see here a lot of read across with the MA's code, but the slight difference here is this idea of an inclusive and accepting society, which is what we are constantly striving for in Northern Ireland. And the image you can see is of a visitor book from the Ulster American Folk Park, which is one of our museum sites. It's from the 15th of August 1998, and the fifth signature from the bottom is from a 12-year-old Spanish student, Fernando Blasco Baselga, who visited our museum that morning and then tragically was killed in the Omagh bombing later that day. It's a reminder of the devastating power of objects and the particular ethical responsibilities that come with curating them. And it also speaks to how our museums in Northern Ireland are part of the story of the place. We don't just sit outside the conflict and comment on it, we are part of it. So this is the very simple cycle that we use in our work, and we come back to time and time again. We constantly looking to develop our collections and ensure we fully represent experiences and any gaps are filled. We think about our interpretive planning so we can share the collections and we can share the stories in inclusive ways. Consultation and engagement are fundamental, helping involve different perspectives and experiences and getting advice from others on what we should do. And then evaluation and review, getting feedback from people, learning, further developing, and then the cycle begins again in response to that feedback. It's an ongoing cycle, ensuring our work remains dynamic and that we continue to provide a platform for engagement. And the feedback is really key because it's obviously easy for us to say that what we're doing is working and we are providing an important service within Northern Ireland. But the audience feedback is what matters. It tells us what's working and what we need to develop. It furthers our own understanding and it gives us confidence and reminds us about the role and value that we perform in our post-conflict society. And then just to end, we are all about making the future. Our vision as an organisation is to celebrate who we are, telling the stories of our past, challenging our present and shaping our future. And in curating conflict with ethics as an essential touch point, we ultimately want to play our part and help others to step up and get involved in shaping a much better future for Northern Ireland. Thank you. And really happy to take any questions.
Hello, I'm Ralph from Culloden Battlefield in Scotland. So a question about how you respond to people who complain. If you represent part of the story or part of a situation or an event, and it really causes that person grief, what's your process for dealing with that all the way to perhaps changing an exhibit?
Actually, that is something that we haven't really had. The people haven't come to us and say they've been particularly offended or upset that we've shared one particular story or event. With exhibitions like Silent Testimony, for example, that has a very emotional impact and people are really moved, but they they then share that with us and say it's been a kind of quite a positive and cathartic experience for them. I suppose the main complaints we would get, if any, were people come to us and say, well, you've talked about that part of Belfast, you haven't talked about the part of Belfast I'm from, or you talked about that event, but my neighbour was injured in that event, which you haven't got anything about. And we always say, well, please, if there's anything you can get for us, if there's anything that you can do to help us to tell this story, we want you to be a part of it. So it's actually not something we've really encountered by people saying you shouldn't have shared that. The other one that we have had was I shared the image from the project Reimagine, Remake, Replay, and the young people getting involved in activism. And for example, mainly the young people in that group would be very pro-choice in their views, and we've shared that in the museum. And we have had some members of the public getting a bit emotional and saying, but why are you saying that? I've had a really difficult experience with this, and my view hasn't been shared, and that's just been a reminder for us that we need to do more to kind of represent a whole spectrum of views. And again, we've given that individual an opportunity. Is there anything that you would like to contribute, even anonymously, to help us to give your side of this debate?
Hi. Yeah, we're good. I'm Danielle. I'm from the Science and Industry Museum in Manchester. I just wondered if you could expand a little bit on how you came about developing your ethical framework that you use internally. What went into that, and sort of what was the consultation process like?
So the ethics policy we have as an organisation, we have used our experience of our work to date. We've used the Museum Association Code of Ethics. We've also used Northern Ireland specific guidance. So, for example, New Decade, New Approach restored the executive in Northern Ireland at the very start of last year. And we've used the guidance that they provide in that, kind of us saying, well, this is where we feel we can make a contribution, and this is what we have to be mindful of in our work. But anything that's kind of specific to our work on the Troubles, we would consult with partners on it. The academic advisory group that we work with helped formulate particular objectives for our work on the Troubles. So we have that overarching policy for us as an organisation, but at a sort of project and interpretive level, we would work with relevant partners to see what that might mean for that particular project.
So I was just going to share a few questions from the swap card, if that's okay. I think quite a few of them you've actually answered around people disagreeing, etc. And maybe this is too hypothetical, but someone's asked, is there ever a time to stop collecting a particular period?
We wouldn't feel so at the moment. We would feel that there is still so much collecting to do. There's still so much that isn't represented in our museum. Some of the people that we survey as part of our work, we ask a question, is there anything you'd like to share? And some of them had said, I would, but not yet. Some people still aren't ready. So I think we're going to have to continue collecting it. And I think, I'm sure other museums find this, I think people still struggle with feeling that anything that's very recent has a place and a value in a museum. So I think we still have work to do to kind of communicate that to people and enable us to keep collecting.
Thank you.
Hi Hannah, it's Christian Bass from National Museums Liverpool. I'm wondering if there's a way of measuring the impact of your work. Can you measure inclusivity and acceptance? And perhaps as a second part to this, what you're doing there is amazing stuff. That is probably a really good role model for every one of us. Just in the concept of the major divisions that we've unearthed in society in the last couple of years, certainly since 2016 across the UK? So it's perhaps a two-part question.
Yeah, I think in terms of how we measure it, it's something that we need to get better at. Just as of this year, we've defined a new corporate strategy as an organisation. We actually have an outcomes framework as part of that for the first time. And that includes that people understand different perspectives on the past, and also that our work contributes to improving good relations. And within that, we're trying to look at measures that we can assess this work over time. So we have lots of data effectively at the moment, but how we measure impact, I think, will be very much linked to these outcomes, and that will be something we'll apply over time. I'm sorry, Christian, the second part of your question? We would hope so. I mean, we are still learning ourselves, so particularly on an international level, we have spoken to colleagues in Sarajevo, for example, and it's been very much an exchange. We've learned from them. Hopefully they've learned from us. The title of my talk today is Curating Conflict, which is also the title of a new publication which we released earlier this year, and we hope it's quite an accessible, almost nuts and bolts description of the type of work that we do, that people could pick out elements of it if it does apply to their work. So Northern Ireland is often held up as a very successful post-conflict society, which it is in many ways, but it still has its own challenges, its own issues, and so I say we are part of that wider international network, that wider international conversation, and we hope that there are aspects of our work that people can take and apply in their own work. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. My email's there if anyone's got any questions that they want to follow up with after this event. Thank you.